So what does Jesus mean in Matthew 5 verse 17? When he says, do not think that I came to abolish the law or the prophets. I did not come to abolish, but to fulfill. A lot of people from various heretical sects of Christianity take that and they think that the Old Testament law is still in place today. This is very far from the case. In fact, the apostles, the disciples of Jesus, Paul, James, Peter, they all affirm that we are under the law of Christ now. So what's really going on verse 17? Well, it is clear that Jesus says that he came to fulfill the law. So how can the law be fulfilled? Luckily for us, Jesus explains this in Matthew 22 when he is asked, what is the greatest commandment in the law? The law of Moses, the Torah. Verse 37, Jesus responds, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. This is the great and foremost commandment. And the second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these two commandments hang the whole law and the prophets. So these two commandments are a summary of the entire law, meaning that if you love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your mind, and you love your neighbor as yourself, you are fulfilling the law, which is something that Israel failed to do multiple times throughout the Old Testament. But that's okay because Jesus came to fulfill that, right? But how do you love your neighbor in the greatest way possible? Well, thankfully for us, Jesus also answers this question. John 15 verse 13, he says, greater love has no one than this, that one laid down his life for his friends. So that is the greatest way you can show your love to your neighbor, to your friends. Now, how does Jesus fulfill this? Well, luckily for us, Jesus also answers this question in John 15 verse 15. I no longer call you servants because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made it known to you. So Jesus reveals everything to his disciples, the 12. The 12 reveal this to other people because Jesus wants it to be revealed to the world. So anyone who is a follower of Christ and loves him is considered the friend of Jesus. So remember, there is no greater love than this, to lay down his life for his friends. And what does Jesus do? He lays down his life for the entirety of the human race. And this accomplishes two things. This is Jesus loving his neighbors, aka humans, because he came here, he came down to earth, he came to live with us, to eat with us, to travel along with us, to teach us. So he came here in the flesh to show us that he can be our neighbor, he can be our friend. But he also accomplishes another thing by sacrificing, laying down his life, which is because he is the unblemished lamb, because he never sinned, he is now repairing the bridge that was burned by us humans, by the human race, which separated us from God. Jesus is now repairing the entire bridge so that we're able to have a full relationship with full communication to God and be able to live among him and be able to also enjoy his full glory as we once did prior to the fall. And remember, this is something that Jesus does willingly. John 10 verse 18 says, no one takes it away from me, talking about his life, but from myself I lay it down. I have the authority to lay it down and I have the authority to take it up again. This is the commandment I received from my Father. So Jesus willingly lays down his life to fulfill the two greatest commandments of the law. By fulfilling the two greatest commandments of the law, he's able to fulfill the entire law. Which is why we are no longer bounded by the law. And Paul writes about this. James writes about this. Peter writes about this. We are now under the law of Christ. So we have to follow the commandments of Christ. We don't need to follow things like the kosher diet. The law was a shadow of what was to come. And it has been accomplished through Christ. So I hope that in this very short video, I have been able to explain to you that the law has in fact been fulfilled by Jesus on the cross. There's no need to continue with the entirety of the Old Testament law because many of those things were shadows of what was to come. So hopefully you are able to understand where I'm getting from. You're able to understand that scripture does back this up. And you're able to show this to some friends who might still believe that we are under the Old Testament, the Torah law.